Welcome back to another episode of Impossible Equals I'm Possible. Oh my goodness, it's been a while since we've been back. So many incredible things have happened, but I'm so grateful to be back to this show. And tonight we have another amazing guest. It's actually her second time on the show. And it was interesting because it was about 6 months ago, and I was just thinking about how fascinating it is that like your entire life can change in 6 months. And what was really cool about it, right? The whole premise of this show is to really learn about the guests and their stories, because we all have these, I call them like moments, impossible moments, that were really the catalyst to drive people to that I'm possible state. And the whole premise of the show is to inspire others to focus on their potential instead of accepting their reality. And what's become so unique is 6 months ago, I didn't really realize this at the time, but when I went back and I rewatched that first episode, which I would drop in the comments, in many ways, we really kind of planned and foreshadowed kind of where Lindsay is now. And, I always like to say before I read these bios, like so many times people get caught up on, what people do. But I always like to share about who the guests are as people, because a lot of them have become mentors, dear friends, and people that are really inspiring to me, the journeys that they've been on. And the person that we have here, she's just an absolutely, I think the fitting word to describe her would probably be this incredible gift that she gave me. We've become really good friends over the past year. She's an absolutely amazing and brilliant person. I just love hearing her speak. And she just has an incredible story and perspective on life. So my guest tonight is my amazing, brilliant friend, Dr. Lindsay Ruiz. Have to remember that. Lindsay is the founder and CEO of Human as Usual, where she focuses on healthy hypergrowth and generative humanism for scaleups and hypergrowth companies. Her work aligns closely with humanity-centric business practices, which is such a crucial element for business success. Lindsay brings 20 plus years working with Fortune 500 and major growth brands across 6 continents in industries ranging from advertising and healthcare slash biotech to technology, retail, and consumer goods and services, and a long-standing career in organizational transformation, leading high visibility initiatives around the complexities of scaling up while maintaining ethical and inspiring leadership. And with no further ado, we have my amazing friend, so grateful to have her back the second time, Dr. Lindsay Ruiz. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here. It's so great to have you back. And what an incredible journey the past 6 months have been. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
With that introduction, I'm blushing a little bit, but thank you. I'm excited to be here, Paul. You're an amazing friend to me too, and it's just great to be able to continue the conversation we started about 6 months ago. So let's do it.
Yeah, I know we talked a lot about your story. We don't need to invest that much, time tonight into it. We can kind of talk about where it's headed. But I know there's a lot of people who are watching that probably haven't met you, because my network and people that I've interacted with has grown a lot in the past 6 months. So why don't you tell everyone who is Lindsay Ruiz and how in the heck did you get to where you are today?
Oh my gosh, let's put it in a concise way. So Lindsay is a little girl from Venezuela that was born and raised there and came to the U.S. 23 years ago, 24 years ago, almost, looking for, building a new life with a lot of dreams and aspirations, and super, super young to know, right, what the story was going to unfold, was going to be. And I have been taking every opportunity that I can to, I don't know, to live a life of congruency, both from a career perspective, from a personal perspective. Definitely being born in Venezuela is a big deal to me because it kind of formed all of my early views of life and some of the values that I still carry with me. And but being here the other half of my life gave me all the formative, right, platform as an adult, as a professional in my career and everything. So it's a looking in retrospect is an interesting combination of perspectives that I had to adjust and make them my own. I started my career actually in Venezuela in advertising and marketing. That's where my undergraduate degree, that's what it served me for. I graduated from college very, very early in life. I was probably 19 years old when I got out of college the first time, so I was able to get into the workforce very early, and stayed in advertising for about 4 or 5 years before I came here. And then coming here, obviously, I had to start from zero now as an immigrant in a new country with a new language, with a new complete set of frames of reference that were new to me that I had to learn. I took a detour career wise into healthcare. I led the business development alongside the operations of uh, let's call it a healthcare organization, to not go into too much detail. It was a startup back in the day when I came. We didn't use that terminology, but they were a startup company, and they wanted to kind of expand the business into the Hispanic community, which was not a thing when I came to the US. And so my marketing background, being bilingual, being Hispanic, kind of positioned me to support that effort. And then I stayed with the organization for like 7 or 8 years until the second wave of change came into my life after I went back to school, completed a master's degree in organization development. That opened a whole new window of possibilities in terms of my career. It took me into corporate America. And ever since, been 15, 16 years working in organizational transformation efforts, like you said in the introduction, which simply means, right, big organizations wanting to change the way in which they do things, whether it is, pushing in like new technology or changing their work environment or their culture, right? Big initiatives like that require very specific infrastructure and orchestration to make it happen when you do it at large scale. So I was in charge of doing that. And I worked in different industries, different companies, and that allowed me to kind of move my career up the ladder, like people say, right, in these kind of environments. And then in parallel to that, I also had an academic career that I got super passionate about, which took me to my doctorate degree as well in organization development, which also had me kind of take a little detour into researching narcissistic abuse in the workplace. All of that to come to last year when I decided to graduate my corporate career and become a founder. So I'm sure I'm missing little corners, but we can go deeper if you want to. But that's in general what makes me who I am, why I'm here, where I come from, and the complexity of a human that I am.
Yeah, absolutely love that because we are like so complex people, right? And sometimes like people always try to put people in like a box, right? We see it a lot on LinkedIn, when it comes to like people forcing people to like niche down, or it's like, oh, who are you serving? And it's like, well, I mean, realistically, there's areas where we can kind of serve different people, right? And as we kind of evolve and change and grow, there's opportunity for kind of all of it. What's so fascinating to me, right? This show, I remember I don't speak on like very many stages anymore or podcasts, and I remember you. I was watching one of the things that we did a couple months ago, and we had this incredible conversation, and you were kind of like curious about the story behind impossible equals impossible, and how I always felt like for the longest time that it was my story, right? And then I kind of realized that it's really everyone's story. And
Yeah.
I'm curious for you because when when I heard the name of your company, my first thought was, oh my gosh, that's like so fitting for her. I'm very curious, like tell us the story behind like as human as usual. Like how did you like come up with that? What does it mean to you, and what was kind of I don't know if you have like a story or like a moment that you would want to share, but I feel like everybody has that like little, I call it like little moments that become like silent catalysts for our loudest breakthroughs. What was kind of that story behind why you left behind your corporate career and decided to become a founder?
Okay, we're probably gonna have to break it down a little bit because the story behind my decision to leave corporate, which does lead into human as usual, really is a personal realization that the direction in my career where I thought I was supposed to go did not longer feel in alignment with myself. And so every step of the way, even though I was getting the title, the salary. I mean, my last role was as vice president of transformation, which in the world of corporate is a big deal. And I thought that was the goal. I thought that the goal was, the bigger the title, the bigger the salary, the more latitude you have to your autonomy, to your sense of self. And what I found is that it's quite the opposite, at least in my experience. What I was doing is renting my capabilities, renting my leadership, waiting for the title, the money, for the recognition of who I thought I was supposed to be. And this is a very personal story in how it came about for me, but that didn't feel right anymore. And instead of feeling complete and accomplished and I had a doctor title, like I had all these things that are supposed to make you happy. And I'm proud of them, but it instead of making me feel complete, it continued to make me feel more and more and more and more disintegrated and broken. And there was definitely a moment in time where that came super clear to me that I was not on the path of growth. I was on the path of self-destruction. And I had to stop, and I had to reclaim and reconvene with myself to really get clear about what what life needed to look like going forward. So the decision to, as I call it today, graduate my corporate career was more about trying to understand what was happening within me. At that time, I didn't have the intention to become a founder, to create this company and these concepts and these ideas that I now have. It was more about, I need to start on square zero. We need to reconvene, and I need to figure out where are all my broken pieces and pick them up one at a time and start putting them back together in that deep recognition that I never ever want to feel the way I felt at that time, because it could have been the end of the road. And so that's kind of where this new chapter really started, right? Reconciling that where I have gotten was the end of it. Like that already served a purpose for me to be where I was, and that I needed um, to learn what was in front of me from that point on. So So yeah, so I started it with a blank page, like the song we were talking about earlier. You know, I started on a full, complete blank page, organizing the information again, dealing with a lot of resentment and rebellion. I remember at that time people would ask me, "But what inspired you to take this big step?" And I said, "I'm not inspired. I feel rebellious. Like this is where I was going. This is not where I was. That was not what they told me what was supposed to be." I felt betrayed by the standard, you know, that I thought I was supposed to follow, and I just decided to put that to rest and start from zero. And so one day at a time, really reconciling first what my why, like not my why in the sense of a vision statement or anything like that. What is it that I really, truly, genuinely care about? You know, career wise, personally. And then it was all about wholeness. Like, how can I come back to feel whole again, right? To feel complete, to feel like I don't have to hide any parts of me or not say this because somebody's going to get mad. Like, I needed to find a space in which every single part of me had was legitimate. Yeah, and so I took a while to go through that process, but I deliberately said, you know, I'm gonna lean into the pain of that, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to unlearn, and we're gonna find Lindsay again in all of these. And then I got to a little bifurcation when last year the job market started to become kind of, you know, messy and complicated to, and that was an indicator for me to think, you know, I really need to rethink my career path onto something that feels more fulfilling and something where I can really truly tap into my leadership with the latitude that I want to have, which I'm not going to find anywhere else. And then I was in that decision for a little bit, like, do I do this? Do I do that? What if I don't find, you know, the career that I want? What if I do? What if I, you know, all the pros and cons of, do I go as a founder? Do I stay in the corporate career? Um, and I just let the process guide me until one day I said, you know, this is the direction, and we are going to put 100%. If I'm going in this direction, there's no plan B. Like I've told you many times, you know, that this is 100%. This is my full-time job. And in the moment I made that decision, I felt like peace, and it felt like everything just fell into place. And that's when I decided peace was going to be my success factor. So, you know, everything that I do from here on, if it disturbs my peace, it's out the window. If it brings me closer to the peace I want to feel in my life, then I just know that's the next step I need to take. And so, yeah, little by little, it's been shaping up on its own in a way. Yeah, and that's brought me to Human as Usual. So, Human as Usual is a three-part brand. One is personal, is be able to say, you know, being broken and feeling broken is as human as it gets, right? And picking up your pieces and putting them back together is as beautiful as it gets, because within the cracks is where you find your gifts and where you find truly what makes you to be you. So that was a piece of Human as Usual. Then there's the piece of business, which that was the rebellious part of me, where I was like, I don't want any more business as usual. That doesn't work. Business as usual is outdated, and everything that's wrong with organizations today has to do with how we understand the human structure. And even though there's a lot of human-centric this and human-centric that, and people, there's not a systemic way to understand, right, how an organization needs to be functioning in order for all those fundamental pieces to come into place, just like you would take a broken piece and kind of put it back together. And that was really the part of my career that is more important to me. And so I figure I can take that and translate it into the direction I really wanted to go. And then there was the part of the whole hype with artificial intelligence and how I felt like it took such a, I don't know, shiny object amplified, situation out there, that it made me a little scary that, we were almost talking about it as though humans are obsolete now. And so I said, a lot of what artificial intelligence is creating and it's meant to do for us comes from the human capabilities. And so we need to reclaim that and own it and know that we are sophisticated the way we are. And that is human as usual. It doesn't get more usual than that because we already have it. So, anyway, I'm making the story super long, but it had different parts and different timing in which it all came together.
No, I love that. I mean, I just love like hearing you talk. We talk about it like all the time. Like you're when you were like, I remember the first one of the first meetings that we met and you were talking about like your accent. I was like, what? I was like, I love listening to her talk. She has like the most amazing accent. And I think what what's so fascinating about that, I remember on our last conversation, you and I really kind of connected because I remember when we were kind of talking about, our life stories and journeys, that I think for both of us, our life has already been so much more than like we ever thought that it would. Like we've already done the things that we didn't think that we would ever do. So it's like a lot of people don't understand like what it's like when you have kind of that like internal conflict, right? It's like, yes, you had the degrees, you had the money, you had the title, but people, and I'm curious for you, this seems kind of like your experience, but I went through an experience last year where I realized like, oh my gosh, like I've always been like chasing things. Like I've always been like seeking validation and like searching, when really this year it's just been about like knowing and trusting kind of who I've always been. And we've even noticed this like really in the forefront with a lot of like these Olympians, right? When people think that they're crushing it in life because they got the gold medals, they got the wife, the kids, the money, the sponsorships, and then when they come out with these specials and interviews talking about how like you know I remember when Michael Phelps came back in 2016, he made it very clear that he was done in 2012. And when he came back, I was like, why in the heck is he coming back? And then he talked about how for 20, 30 years, he's like, I didn't swim for me. I swam for other people. I swam for my coaches. I swam for the accolades and all these things. And he was like, I wanted to kind of come back and go out on my terms. Right. And I feel like in many ways, I know for sure that's the journey that I've been on over the past year. But I feel like for you, would you say that that's kind of like really similar to kind of where you're at now, where it's like your currency in life is not money. It's about like owning your time and creating impact. And, there's a quote that I love about there's no greater form of wealth than peace of mind. And I think that that's so true because at the end of the day, like you have to live with yourself. So yeah, would love to know kind of if that's kind of, a lot of the same realizations that you've come to, and if you kind of see that in the same way.
I agree with you. I in a way I think I was also conditioned to chase things down. I lived in retrospect, right, with the new awareness that I have now. I always lived in conflict because in a way I feel like I was following the chasing that you talk about, right? I thought that was the only option. That was my way to prove my worth to the world, right? And so I did. So I kind of fell into that. But I always did that in conflict with my own internal need for autonomy and latitude and creativity. And so everywhere that I went, at school, at work, in my leadership career, I never 100% gave in my identity. I always was the disruptor. I was always people would say, "Well, you're such a breath of fresh air." Like people would give me feedback like that, meaning I would just show up and I would still be stubborn and I would still be creative and I would still try to do my own thing, right, within the confines of conformity, right? And so I didn't understand through that process. I mean, even when I proposed the topic for my dissertation, when I said, I don't want to study, the effects of team building in organizations. I want to study these type of awful, terrible abuse that happens in organizations. And my school said, "What are you talking about? We cannot talk about those things." Like I always had this little conflict of I have to conform, but I also have to break through myself and do my own thing. And so, but I kind of had that internal conflict. Like I knew, but it was also out of awareness to take control of it and to make decisions that would allow me to let go of parts that I was attaching to that would pretty much give me my worth. Um, until, like I said, last year, and last year was not the first time that I kind of fell through. I had a couple other moments where that happened to me, but last year was decisive. Like last year was a end of line situation. Like we cannot continue. There's no way this is sustainable. Um, and and it was the moment to say, I have to figure this one out. I really have to go heads down and understand what's going on within me and how it's displaying out and why am I making the decisions that I'm making and why am I giving in, my value to other people's ideas of what I'm supposed to be doing. Um, and so that's kind of how it played out for me in my journey.
Yeah, no, like I can really relate to that because it's like when I left behind my finance career. I mean, you and I've had this conversation privately like so many times. I think I even talked about it on the show that we did a few months ago. But so
Yeah.
many people looked at it as like, oh my gosh, you're making like such a massive mistake, right? Because they're like, you had just
Mhm.
figured out how to do this, you've been doing this, like, why would you leave it behind? And it's one of those things that I don't think people really understand it until they're actually in that situation. It's why I believe that people have to like hit some type of rock bottom. I mean, what rock bottom looks like for each person is like different, but you truly like really don't understand what it's like to be at that level until you're there and you're like, oh, and now I have to like climb out of the hole, right? Where it's like for a lot of people they try so hard to avoid it. And I think bringing this conversation of humanity and a lot of these things, one of the things that I've always loved about you, I mean I still love about you, we have like so many fascinating conversations, but you're always willing to kind of speak your truth, like even at times when you have to stand alone, right? When there's nobody else that thinks that way, but you'll hold true to your ground. And I remember this was like a conversation that we were talking about on the previous episode, how belonging is such a weird feeling for a lot of people. And the thing that I've learned, there was a quote, I believe it's originally from Maya Angelou, but where I heard it was through Brene Brown. She talked about this idea of I belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Where it's like, if I'm around like my group or my tribe, like I'm happy to like thrive with everyone else and be in that alignment. But when I have to like stand alone in my truth, and there's a lot of times where I stand alone, right? Especially in professional spaces and environments, and I'm okay doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I love about the conversation that we were kind of having in the pre-live, and also like a little bit earlier in this, is this idea that so many people are focusing on validation, right? I didn't realize how I was auditioning for these competitions to become a speaker. And when I first started doing audio events, I did something this year with the scrolls that I stopped because I was like, wait a minute, this isn't in alignment with me. Like, this is coming from a place of ego.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point that you shared about this conversation of human as usual, one of my newest things that I've been doing that I love is a audio event series about redefining thought leadership, because so many people seek the validation from the title. But just because you have something on your profile that says thought top voice, and this doesn't make you a thought leader, right? Like, what makes you a thought leader is living your message, actually um, practicing what you preach, and then using that to drive or create positive impact and change in other people.
Yeah.
And that is really at the core of what I've seen you do through your content, through your poems, that the series that you used to do, which was like If My LinkedIn Post Could Talk. I loved all of it, and it was because you really got to learn about the human. And it's like we were saying on LinkedIn, right? So many people get caught up on this whole like, oh, I'm going to serve organizations or I'm going to serve individuals. But really, at the end of the day, like, we're all people. And that human connection is what's going to separate you from everyone else. And yeah, I mean, I just love everything that you said for that.
Yeah. When I told you I had other moments, right? We hit rock bottom in different intensities, right, throughout life. And then I had an earlier rock bottom moment, um, way before this one. I want to say 2012, maybe about 10 years ago. And it was a moment of a lot of complications. My marriage was ending, my work was not working. I had a little baby. Like, it was just a lot of turmoil. And one of the moments for me of raising my awareness onto something different was sitting, rather laying down on my therapist's couch. I used to do a lot of therapy at that time. And I remember laying down, just crying because I couldn't articulate my experience. So I could just let it flow. And my therapist was sitting across the room while I just there, like, just, I don't know what to say. I don't have the words. I was so like stuck. And she said, Lindsay, she said, oh my God, Lindsay, the problem here is that you lost your voice. And that feedback was like speaking truth into myself, you know? And I walked out of that session, and it was like a renaissance. It was like to say, oh, that's true. I and I'm always been outspoken, and I typically have a point of view on things, but at that point in time I was so hijacked that I couldn't articulate my fears, my feelings. I had so much fear that I could not even advocate for myself. I was paralyzed. And just like I felt this last time, it was something I never want to feel like that before. I never want to feel the fear of paralyzing because I cannot articulate what my experience is or my needs or my feelings. And I started working towards reclaiming my voice, which I still do until today. And is when I started sort of using LinkedIn as an outlet, like back in 2014, when I read an article that talked about dealing with fear of rejection. It was an HBR article, and the recommendation was, go to social. They didn't say LinkedIn because it was not a thing back then, but to just go on social media and post things that you like and do it for yourself, not because you want likes or you want comments, just because you use your voice as a channel. And I used LinkedIn because it was not popular, so I would just put stuff in there, and who cares? Nobody would see it anyway, right? But if I put it on Facebook, which was like the main thing, that would be terrifying. And so, step by step, and then I started writing, and then I obviously, dealt with my personal situations, and I changed my job, and I ended my marriage. And like the moment I started reclaiming my ability to speak up and to say and to use my voice to catalyze, and self advocate, I brought back a part of myself that was dying, basically. And so that means a lot to me. That's a life saving circumstance. And I've always, I have always seen ever since that moment that when I have a need for self censorship, when I feel like, oh, I'm not going to say this because somebody's going to be upset or somebody's going to think wrong about me or somebody, right? Is the urge to use your voice to be able to articulate whatever is the conviction, right, that you have in that moment. So I battle self censorship, and it's my motivation to every day get more and more clear about how I want to use my voice, how I want to use my words, written, spoken. And I still practice every day because I never want to be back in the place of muting myself for fear, right? So that's kind of how what that means to me.
No, I mean that was like so powerful because it reminds me of an experience that I had last year when I was like speaking pretty much every day last year and I lost my voice. I remember it was like the first couple months, I think it was like January or February. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I lost my voice, like what am I going to do?" And that's when I realized, so many times people tie what they do into like who they are. And what I learned
Mhm.
very quickly is that that's when I got back to like writing. And a lot of people like didn't know it, but I've been writing since, gosh, probably since I was a child, easily like first,
Mhm.
second grade. Been doing a lot of reading and writing. So it's like what I didn't realize at the time was it was kind of teaching me that this is quiet time. Like you don't need to talk. It's time to listen.
Mhm.
And I think that and we've talked about this too, like so many people have this perception that self-awareness is like this supreme thing where it's like, oh, I'm just aware of everything and you're not going to make the same mistakes. But really what it's about is it's like it's just noticing it. And I remember I go back to something that my mentor mom Deno Delgado shared with me, and she said that um it's not where you fell, it's where you slipped. And what's so interesting is that we have like so many slips, right? It's like, oh, I'm not eating properly, slip. I'm not sleeping well, slip. I'm not like exercising, slip, right? And then it's like the only time that people really tend to take notice is when you fall. And I always like to say like if you don't learn how to like there's a phrase that our mutual friend Joe Jacoby says, and he's like, you need to know like what is your race pace, right? Because it's like so many times people try to operate off of other people's visions. Or the question that's like really changed my life this year is what do you say? Because I don't think people realize it, but so many times they tend to like project onto other people. And it's like, oh, this worked for me, like, I think you should do this. And what I've really kind of come to find is that when you share like your story and your experiences, it's not to like project on people, but it's just to say like, hey, I was in the same position. This is kind of like what I experienced. This is what I did. Maybe this will help you. Right. And it really is this idea of getting people to come to a place of creating their own truths and rules instead of accepting other people's. And I mean, you know me, like I'm very I own my stuff. I like to say that I take extreme ownership. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is so many times we're taught, right, whether it's in business or like even personally, like, oh, don't talk about politics, right? And this has been a very we'll say polarizing, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
um election year. And I remember, like, I saw that you were speaking up, and I was like, oh man, I was like, no, I was like, not, not her, because I kept seeing it on all my feeds. But when I was able to kind of zoom out to zoom in, as I like to say, and kind of step out of my perception and really take into the fact that it's like, okay, well, Paul, you need to look at it as she's concerned because she's an immigrant. She, even though you're a U.S. citizen now, like that's still part of your
Mhm.
being and all that type of stuff. She's a woman, right? And she's now like stepping into the entrepreneur world and of being, a founder, and this is like uncharted waters. And I had to think about that, and I was like, I obviously, like, we share the entrepreneur thing, but it's like I'm not an immigrant, right? I'm not a female. So I think what I really want to be so grateful for is that you had the courage to do that, because you were able to give me a different perspective where I was able to kind of just take a step back, and not only learn from you, but also support you. Because
Mhm.
I don't think a lot of men especially realize that, and especially people on LinkedIn, like if you're creating content, if you have a network that you've grown, you have a lot of influence and you have a lot of power. And the things that you do or don't do in that matter. And what's so funny is I've had multiple people, when we've collaborated together, when you've come to my audio events, and they'll tell me like, "Oh my gosh, like the way that, you speak about her, it's like I had a conversation, like it's true." And I think that that's what's become so powerful about this is that, and you and I like to say, we really do connect on like a soul level, even though we've known each other for probably like about a year. It really feels like we've known each other for a long, long time. And I just think that that aspect of the conversation to me is human as usual, right? Like just being kind of who you are, right? Not caring
Yeah.
about what other people think. And I've talked about this in the beginning, but what I've come to find on my journey, that the greatest form of validation is living your message and your values. And my we'll kind of get into this a little later. Like, obviously my word theme and area of focus this year is intuition, but I was so close to changing it to this word consonance, because I love the definition where what you do aligns with who you are. And as I look at my life, like that's really the journey that I want, right? Is I'm working with people that I want to work with. I'm working when I want to work. I I get to control the messages and the content that's coming out, right? Like I don't have people creating stuff for me. I don't have people that are like, you have to do this and I'm gonna pay you. It's like you're willing to really like bet on yourself. And it's been such an incredible journey to just watch you completely just like peel back the layers of the onion, and share your story and share your poems and all these things. So it's been so fun for me to just
Thank you.
sit back and be a cheerleader.
That means a lot. I mean, there's a lot of what you said that we can break down too, because first of all, I think people need to know too that I almost double your age, right? Not only am I an immigrant, not only am I a woman, in the context of our friendship, we also belong in different generations. And that doesn't truly matter when it comes to the human experience that we have and where we connect and how we can have these conversations where none of that matters until you talk about it, right? Like if we don't bring that into awareness, it doesn't exist. But it's part of, right, the complexity of how we come together as humans in discussing these complex experiences. There is I want to touch on everything that you said, but I want to talk about it how I connect it. I in my mind works with connecting dots. I'm always taking this concept from here, that concept from there, and then I kind of make my own thing, and right, and I act. So I want to start with what you said in terms of your experience of me coming from a place of integrity and completeness and congruency. That really stems from my education. Okay. My academic career is in organization development. And the core premise of my career is that we use ourselves as an instrument of change. It's called use of self. So it means that in order to be able to be a leader, in order to be able to be a professional, in order to be able to affect change in an organization, in an environment, a system, the first thing that we have to do is get inwards, understand who we are, understand how to use our capabilities, our strengths, our cognitive abilities, our self-awareness, right? Everything that makes us who we are, we have to know each other. We have to know ourselves so well. I took a note because I don't want to forget something. We have to know ourselves so well that when the moment we walk into a room, even if it is only our energy, our smile, our concern, like anything that we bring with us, alters the energy of the room we're walking into. So we are instrumenting change from that millisecond. Okay. So that idea alone had a profound effect in me in how I understood my role in the world. And when I learned that, I accepted that role for me. I accepted that not only for work, but at home and with my friends and with my communities. And right, I have the first step responsibility to instrument change wherever I go. That comes with me naturally with the composition of who I am. And with that, like Spider-Man says, comes a lot of responsibility, right? Now, when you accept that, it comes with everything else, right? So when it comes to self-awareness, I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to forget, because you went through different, I want to organize it in a way that hopefully makes sense. So when it comes to self-awareness for me, I think we sometimes confuse self-awareness with moral superiority. Self-awareness is such a personal journey. It's not to be advocated for, it's not to be promoted, it's not to be say I have self-awareness, you don't have self-awareness. It's not even cognitive, it's something experiential. It's a way to understand yourself internally in ways that you can actually act deliberately externally. But it's not an artifact, and it's not something that you put out there as a frame of reference for other people. My self-awareness and your self-awareness they're not competition, they're not things that we have to compare, right? It's our internal thermometer. And so that's how that's why for me, every step of the way when I have fallen and broken, um, my self-awareness has been the thing that speaks to me and said, we cannot, it kind of stopped me on my rails and said, we cannot continue, that this is not in alignment, this is incongruent, you're missing things here, right? But it doesn't give me the right to say, well, because I think I'm self-aware, which is another thing, right? It's a form of bias. Then I have the right to impose that on other people, right? Everybody's gonna have their own journey, and hopefully when you share your experience and I share my experience and we put it together, we transform, right? That's something that Carl Jung says a lot. He's a psychologist, or used to be a psychologist. And he said something to the effect of, when two personalities meet, it's like chemistry, right? In the best cases, if there's any reaction, both people transform. And that's as far as it goes in my view, in the way in which I reconcile this. Then the other thing is, not caring about what other people think. That, I've gone through different stages of that. I used to care a lot. Like, I used to not what other people thought, but more like how other people accepted me. Right? Like I told you, I've always lived in conflict with my rebellion and my self-worth in the eyes of others. And so I never really truly cared of, I'm gonna do XYZ to please people, but I always had an attachment to, are people find worthy of their love, right? And then I moved to the other extreme, which was, I really am not going to deal with people, and I'm just gonna isolate and do my own thing. And that may have been kind of translated as if I don't care what other people think, but it was more like self-protection from being hurt and from not being valued and from not being loved, and my fears with myself, my own demons that I was fighting. And today, where I am, I don't think about it. I got to a point where that's not a thing in my life. What I'm more focused on is, what do I care about? And I speak to that and I act on that, and if and whoever resonates with, then great. And if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter to me. It means that it doesn't matter to other people, but it still matters to me. And so the measure of what other people think has no meaning in my life, or measure in my life anymore, because it doesn't calibrate what I care about. Which brings us to politics. So I grew up in Venezuela, like I mentioned. My country, so my formative years were in Venezuela, my elementary education, my high school education, my history, everything, right? My country, for context, was in dictatorship until 1958. And then from 1958 to 1998, which is my generation almost, I'm in the middle of that generation, the education system was really, really, really strong in teaching us the value of democracy, your civic duties, right, with your country, with society, with your communities. I also grew up in a predominantly Catholic country, so there was a lot of that sort of ingrained value of, we're connected to each other and we have to, commune with each other. And so being a citizen has a loaded responsibility, right, from a civic perspective. And because my country fought for its democracy for so long, it was in the fabric of our culture to cultivate a civic duty and a value for democracy as an everyday thing. It's an everyday conversation. There's no taboos, there's no stigma, there's no this candidate versus the other candidate. It's just a civic value. So that is within me. It's part of what makes me who I am. It's part of what makes the things that I care about. My country fell on dictatorship again in 1998 until today because we didn't protect and truly embraced, right? Hold tight the imperfections of democracy, because we were a young democracy. We didn't know how that would work, right? Everybody was in the same experiment. So, in my awareness today, that value is very strong. And I have a frame of reference. And that value and that sort of mindset and that history that I carry with me from another country and another story is, again, what makes me use myself as an instrument where I can to voice, right, the things that I'm seeing that I feel like, oh my gosh, we should be talking about these things. Um, but also no holding too much space for, is my friend gonna like me because I say this, or is my other, in my mind is more, I have a responsibility to educate with what I know, because if I hold back what I know, what I lived through, what my country lived through, what the history of it all is, and I don't use myself as an instrument to provide that little bit of education I can provide, I am not living my values. And so if it resonates with people, it resonates with people. If it doesn't resonate with people, it doesn't have any particular effect on me living through what I feel is the right thing and what is my moral responsibility in that particular context. So I hope I made some sense, but all of that is interrelated. If you can see, it's not binary.
Oh no, I mean I got everything. I mean you and I always talk about how everything about our human experience is kind of like interconnected, and we're so much more alike than we are different. And
Mhm.
I think so many ways like people forget that. In your bio, and we were actually kind of talking about this on the pre-live as well. Can I know it's kind of like a combination question, right? Like you obviously did something incredible, and I don't have very many asks, but for anybody who's watching, I think Lindsay dropped the link in the comments. She actually put a proposal to apply
Mhm.
for South by Southwest in 2025. So if you're watching, I would love if you vote and support her. But talk to us about like what is this idea of generative humanism, because that's such a unique term. Like I don't think I've heard of it before. Like what is it, and how do you kind of see your company kind of incorporating that into businesses and other like organizations or entrepreneurs that you serve?
So we have been humans for 200,000 years. Okay. And as humans, we have gone through transitions, right? Of what it means to be human, right? We came from the times when being human was almost being part of the ecosystem with other animals and other, very primitive ways of life. Then we transitioned through when, the transformation of society was seen through religion and politics and, emperors and all those moments of transformation that brought us to the present history. And then we went through the Renaissance, and then we went, like, every stage of humanity has taken us to where we are today. And what has taken us to where we are today is our unchangeable capacity to create, to reproduce, to invent, to follow a natural intelligence, right, that we all have, and to renew. And so generative humanism is that capacity that we all have as humanity to be able to move and grow and evolve and create and reproduce from one stage to another and evolve and advance. We hear recently a lot of generative AI and artificial intelligence as if it is an innovation that has never existed. But we have had it for 200,000 years. Okay. And so my message through my business, through this idea of hopefully participating in a bigger panel, is to be able to say, and how it links to human as usual, it should be able to say, we exist and we have all these capabilities that we have had. That is what makes humanity as unique as it is in a bigger ecosystem that is the universe. And I don't want people to forget about that. And I want people to remember that. And I want us to reconnect with that in the space of work, because work should be dignifying, work should be regenerative, work should be fulfilling, work should be evolutionary, and not the task valued activity that we have made it to be, or the transactional external activities that we made it to be. Because we have an intrinsic need to self-actualize. We have an intrinsic need to not live in survival. Even though we're designed to live in survival, we are designed to innovate out of that survival. And it's not an external capability. It's not something that we borrow from somebody or somewhere. Every one of us has it. And the more we are connected to that in a workplace, where what is a workplace? It's a bunch of humans together trying to get job done and trying to accomplish a goal, right? The more we tap into that and we understand how to use it, and we understand how we own it and how we have it and how we bring it forward, then work becomes a creative playground, and it becomes a space where we all grow and we all self-actualize and we all evolve. And that has a huge impact on society, which has a huge impact on humankind. So in a nutshell, that's what I want to evangelize.
No, that's powerful. Like, I'm always just so fascinated when people talk about ideas that are different, but I think there's so much truth in that, because I remember on one of our last conversations that I think it was like a comment conversation, but you were talking about this idea how companies focus like so much on like profits over people. And I was like, well, isn't that funny? Because if it's not for people on both sides of the coin, right? Like if it's not for your employees, but then if it's not for your customers, you don't make profit as an entrepreneur or a business owner. And I think sometimes people forget that, right? It's like they make money, but it's like, yeah, but you are making money because there are other people who are buying your products, right? And you're starting to see this huge shift where a lot of like companies are trying to just replace all their staff with like robots or AI. And it's just like the the thing that's invaluable about human connection, and this is why like I can use this reference because I know that you love sports, is that's why like the analytics become so like misleading, because part of being an entrepreneur and being a leader and a decision maker in business is you have to make decisions with incomplete
Mm-hmm.
data. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know this probably better than a lot of other people, but data can also be like very misleading,
Yeah.
because it's like you were saying, right? Like everybody has their biases and things they don't really kind of tell you, but if you can kind of like read between the lines and ask the right questions, you kind of figure out like, okay, well, that's why this person said this. And I think why I'm so excited about it is because that is this awareness part, whether you want to call it self-awareness or just like awareness of your environment, people, whatever it is. I think that's such a
Mhm.
pivotal part because a lot of people are really like existing instead of living,
Mhm.
and the fact that you really get to kind of pursue this full time now is exciting. And I'm so, so happy for you. And I wish you the best. I just have a pretty strong feeling that I feel like next time it's next year, right? Yeah, next year, and I have a feeling that you'll be speaking on a massive stage.
Oh my gosh, that would be awesome. That was a big risk to again to break through those fears, right? To be able to say, well, how else can I use my voice, and how else can I use myself as an instrument and share something that can help us remember, right? How powerful and sophisticated we are, and all the good things that we can do, as businesses, and utilize our organizational structures to accomplish other than the transactional metrics that we're got used to. Um, I I I really think we need to start figuring out how to make people believe again in work, in the workplace, in the leaders. Um, we weren't like this forever. It kind of got deviated into where we are, but it was not like that for the 200,000 years. So there's a frame of reference that's important that we recover so we can continue to evolve in the right direction. You talked about data. Data is as good as the frame of reference that makes meaning out of it. So data for the sake of data doesn't really tell you, unless the lens that you see data through and make meaning off of it gives you some kind of indicator to go in a direction that accomplishes, right, what you're trying to get to. So if the frame of reference is aligned with misleading goals and misleading values, so if we're only going to look at data from the value of profit, the frame of reference is only going to indicate, right, what the value of profit is according to that data, and is going to ignore everything that that data might also be saying about the impacts of that on the rest of the ecosystem. So I do think we have a responsibility there too, um, which is stuff that I want to bring back to the table.
Yeah, this has been such an amazing conversation, Lindsay. I just have a couple more things that I kind
Yeah.
of want to hit on. You, I know that we could talk for hours, and the thing that's so interesting, right, with you being like really kind of, would you say that you're a first generation entrepreneur? Like, I don't know if that would be
Yeah.
accurate. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, yeah, I think so. I can call myself that.
Yeah, because that's like that was kind of my experience, right? And it's a huge, as you know, it's such a. I like to say that being an entrepreneur is like a completely different world because the way that you view things are just so different than people who are like working for an organization, right? And they get a paycheck. Like you've been on both sides of that coin. Um, I always like to say that probably like one of the most important questions that I've learned over the past year is really this idea of asking myself, like, what is your currency? And we were kind of talking about that in the pre-live, and I know like one of the biggest challenges that I had last year when I pivoted from my finance career to do LinkedIn strategy full time and work with people was this narrative that like oh, Paul, like soul work like doesn't really pay anything, right? And it's like it's what you're aligned to do, but there's no like money in it, right? I think a lot of people have quote unquote passion projects that they would love to do, but the money just wasn't there, or they don't know how to like flip it and get to a point where it's really kind of like sustainable. And one of the things that I wish that I knew on my journey was that it's so important to separate your value in the marketplace, but then also like your value as a human, right? And really just understanding this difference between price versus value. And so many people tend to loop the fact that, oh, if I'm not like making money or this, then like that affects like your value as a person. I'm kind of wondering like how has that part of the journey played out for you, and anything that you've like really kind of uncovered or had a breakthrough that you would kind of want to share.
So for me, mm, so I have never, I have a conflict with this topic because I personally have never put any particular value or motivation or driver when it comes to money. Um, I see money as, like I said, transactional, an output. I put value on what you can do with money, right? I want to live, a life of, I don't want to be like, I grew up in poverty and a lot of uncertainty. So I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to be able to pay my bills. I want to be able to put my son through school. I want to live in a safe area, right? I never want to experience again what it means to not have a home, right? And so those things for me are valuable, and I know you need money because that's the system we live in to acquire those. But when it comes to my decisions, my career, my passions, the things that fire me up, money is not one of those. I have left money on the table in situations that do not, that like I would never take any money under any circumstance for those kind of situations. Which other people might have said, "Oh, but that's a big deal. Why would you not care? Like, it's money. Just take it." I'll be like, "Heck no! I cannot sleep if I do that." And so I have a conflict of values when it comes to that. Um, and so what I landed on to resolve that conflict is that my currency is peace. I want to feel the utmost peace in my life to a point where I want to become so strong at rejecting everything that disturbs my peace. Not because I'm rebellious, but because it's an automatic response to knowing, right, that my measurement of success is if I'm doing this project, if I'm working with this client, if I'm getting paid this amount of money, I have no reservations inside of me that can make me feel anxious or concerned or upset or doubtful because I'm receiving, right, those resources. And in the same capacity, I want to be super strong to be able to say on the spot, this is disturbing my peace, whether it's money, whether it's work, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a community. And the moment and that this is where self-awareness comes in place, right? The moment I feel disturbance in disintegration and brokenness that comes out of that, I don't need to know anything else. I don't need to investigate anything else. I don't need to dig into it. I don't need to question it. I just know that's the indicator that that's not where I need to be turning. That is for me like the ultimate life I want to live, because I never, ever, ever again want to feel hyper vigilant. I never, ever again want to worry about what other people think. I never, ever, ever, ever again want to feel like I have to compromise who I am, where I come from, what I talk about, whether people like it or not, whether, like, I don't want to live a compromising existence anymore. So that's my currency.
Oh my goodness, what a powerful answer. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I asked that question. And I want to say hello to some people. And it's so funny because I'm so used to saying the Garden of Excellence. You know what? Heck, we'll bring it to the live show. Margaret, so good to see you, my friend. And Lindsay, I think you have a new friend, a new fan
No.
in Miss Georgia here. She's been blowing up the chat. And yeah, she's inspiring. Wow, Lindsay, that's powerful. I
Thank
think
you.
I this is kind of like a personal question, but I feel like kind of a two-part question. So, like I've been talking a long, long time about how so many people look at LinkedIn as this professional platform, but it's really probably, I would say, only been, I want to say, probably within the past like 6 to 8 months where you've really like been where we've really been learning about Lindsay, right? Because like for so long, it was always like your professional, what you were doing professionally, or I remember like a couple things I would hear you speak on your dissertation about narcissism in the workplace. But I'm really curious for you, how has like bringing and incorporating your personal life and like your stories and who you are and your perspectives and all these things, and really blending kind of that into your professional life, how have you found that has not only impacted your journey and experience on LinkedIn, but Lindsay on like a soul level? Have you found that like blending them really brings kind of that inner peace where it's like you're not in conflict with yourself as much anymore, because it's like you're starting to achieve really this idea of consonance where what you do is like aligning with kind of who you are?
And you mean like in the way I show up on LinkedIn?
Yeah, because over the past like 6 to 8 months, I mean, I knew a lot of this stuff because we would talk like privately and stuff, but just getting to see you like share it and see a lot of like the impact that some of the posts have had, where people are like, "Oh, Lindsay, that was like my story," and people sharing a lot of stuff. How has that really kind of? I know it's changed your experience on LinkedIn, but how has it really transformed you as a human?
So it has been, it's almost as if I'm writing my story in real time. And I feel like somebody asked me the other day, how do you balance working on yourself and working on your business? And right, this idea of balance, as if everything is compartmentalized. And the way I look at it today is it's I don't have to balance anything. Everything is part of how I'm writing my story and how my business is not my business without me. Like, I feel like for people to understand what I do professionally, they first need to understand what drives me to what I do professionally, right? Just like we talked about politics, when you put politics out there, oh, this and that. But when you sit down and say, well, this is what it means to me, and this is what's behind my motivation to X, Y, Z, then you understand that it's all intrinsic. It's all a part of the whole of who I am. And so I find LinkedIn to be a very practical way to do that. I don't have to sit down and write a book for 7 years and then all of a sudden come out, like, right, and be like, oh, I've been there for these 7 years and nobody knew about me, and all of a sudden here's my biography. It's kind of like fun to just write little pieces in real time, and sometimes I can share the vulnerable parts of me through the poetry that I write, and sometimes I can show the professional parts of me through the things that I write to advise in certain pieces of business. And sometimes people can know that I'm also funny and that I have points of view that are really strong, and right, all of that, it should not be a surprise for anybody who wants to do business with me. And so I I think it's also a way to put out a magnet, right? Like I never want to deceive anybody. I never want anybody to come in contact with my profile of LinkedIn or my branding and then, look at me all professional and, generative humanism, and then make a joke or make a comment or put a point of view there and disappoint them because they had an image of me because I just shared partially, what is important for me. So in this process of integrating everything, when people think of human as usual, I yes, I want them to know the professional part of human as usual, but I also want them to know that this is just what holds it together with also how human as usual I am, right? And because I don't think those are disconnected. And I don't think there's such a thing as balance. You don't balance anything. You have one day with a number amount of hours, and you have to show up with everything that you got, do those 8 hours, 10 hours a day, right? Um, and so it all comes together, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, you said so much there, and I actually, going back to the money conversation, I just wanted to share a quote really quick that I learned from training with Danelle, and she said that you'll never be able to outperform your self-esteem, and you'll never be able to out earn your self-worth, right? To really like kind of illustrate that idea that it really is all about, internal. And I've loved this conversation in so many ways. I'm so excited for you. As much as like people see me like speaking and doing events and all these things, like I don't think people realize at my core I just love like sitting back. Like I love being the person that like sits in the back and just claps for other people, because it's so fun, right? And I don't think people realize that it impact requires like attention. You have to get it somehow, even when you don't necessarily want it. And I'm so happy that you are not only getting attention, but you got like a whole every time you do a post and you share something, I see like the hundreds of, probably, I know you have like thousands of people in your network, but there's a ton of people who are rooting for you, and a lot of us know kind of where you started versus where you're at now. And I mean, you and I always talk about this, right? It's always like an evolution. Just when you think you know something, you'll get an experience, as I like to say, a perspective slap that is like, oh, well, I don't think you needed to learn this. And it's been so fun for me. Georgia and Margaret, and I know a few other people are here, but LinkedIn's being odd. Thank you all so much. I I feel like it would be such a fitting way to end it. I don't you don't have to share, because I know we did this on the previous one, but I I remember one of like the most memorable things from our first conversation was really kind of this idea. And I was freaking out because I saw you made a post about it. About this idea that my story is not over, right? And being kind of unwritten, like the song by Natasha Bedingfield. Um, when you think about this kind of new chapter of your life, and in many ways, like it really is unwritten, right? Like you really have no idea kind of where this is going to go. I mean, you have like a vision and all these things, but you really don't know kind of how it's going to play out. And we were just talking about how every day you come across people on your journey that are like, wow, like how cool was that out of all the people in the world, I got to meet and interact with that person, are has this really been a season where not only are you like excited to enter the unknown and uncharted waters, but you seems like you've really been kind of just doubling down and just being really present in this new like unwritten experience.
Yeah, it feels that way to me too. I every day people think that I have a plan because I've been executing. I've been methodological on how I'm executing because that's how I execute, that's how I work. But it is truly unwritten. Like every day I wake up and I respond to what I have in that day. And every day I discover either a little piece of information, a little piece of awareness, a little resource, something else that helps me build what I'm building progressively in as it emerges, as opposed to boxing myself in to the bias I already have around this idea. And the only thing scary about that, genuinely, is how far can I go with this way of doing it, right? Um, because yes, I also am a mom and I have responsibilities and I want my business to be successful and all of that, right? So it's sometimes it's scary to think, will I have the time? Will time be compassionate enough with me to give me the latitude that I'm looking for, to not have to rush the process, right? And to not have to get distracted with the same things. I used to get distracted before because what I don't want to do is contaminate what is coming into emergence. I don't want to contaminate the what I discover every day, which shapes up, right, what I'm trying to build and what I'm trying to create and what I'm trying to define with this new chapter. So everything else except that little uncertainty that is the tangible part of this feels amazing, honestly. It feels liberating. It feels creative. It feels generative. It feels like I'm living my truth. It feels like it's my timing. I don't have to live on anybody else's timing. Um, it feels free, like free from expression, right? I don't have the anxiety of, um, is the market gonna believe that I have the chair? Like I don't care about that, and so I'm doing it in my own terms. And that in itself is something that I value and appreciate and hold close and protect very much. Um, and so yeah, I I hope I don't become homeless in the process. But other than that, I want to
No,
think. I want to
go
think
ahead.
that because I'm trying to follow the little cues, the little dents in the universe, that I'm being led in a direction where there's protection, where the timing is just gonna be perfect, and how all of these stuff continues to come together. And so I try to believe that and stay focused on that, so that this other side of my head sabotaging doesn't take a lot of room. Sometimes it does, but it's not as often as it used to be.
Yeah, it's so incredible, and I think one of the things that I would just share with you from my experience is like one of the biggest mistakes that I made was not asking, right? You have so many incredible people who you've been able to give back a lot on LinkedIn. If there was just one thing that I would share is like don't be afraid to ask, because you know your intention, right? Like you know that you can impact people in a positive way and be an asset to them. And there's a lot of people out there, like I always say, if you don't, if they don't pay you, they're going to pay somebody else, and you have no idea what that person is going to deliver. And in my experience, it's just it's led to more problems, because then you have to come back and overcome the poor experience that they had with working with the other person. And yeah, as I always like to say, ask for forgiveness instead of permission, because
Yeah.
a lot of times like people are waiting eternity and for something that isn't going to come. And this has just been so fun for me. I mean, you and I, we have so many incredible conversations, and I'm just so grateful to have you in my network, in my world, and I'm so excited for what this next chapter kind of has in store for you, and anything that I can do to help you on your journey and get to, wherever it is that you want to go, how you want to do it, is something that I'm happy to do. And I always do this at the end. So I am going to give you the full screen. And
Oh
I
my
I think that it's
God.
so cool, because we were just talking about this the first time when we did this episode like 6 months ago. As Human as Usual wasn't really built yet, but it was kind of like you were kind of heading down that road. So it's like to be able to come back 6 months later and see you like build it, create your website that you actually used two people who are in Venezuela, right? When you could have used
Mhm.
anybody else. Like all those things are just so powerful. And what I will say is, like, when you make it, you're gonna have so much gratitude, and it's gonna be such an emotional experience, because you know like how you got there. I think a lot of people get obsessed on speed, but it's like that idea that we've talked about throughout this show, is that you can do stuff for money, you can do it quick, but at the end of the day, like, you're always going to have to live with yourself, right? Like, you're going to have to sleep at night and live with the decisions that you did or didn't make. And I just love what you're doing on your journey. So I'm going to hand it to you. Definitely, everybody, if you're watching this live or on the replay, please go vote and support Lindsay for South by Southwest 2025. And yeah, Lindsay, take it away. Anything that you want to share, let people know, like, who are the type of people that you're looking to serve. And I mean, how can like other people support you on LinkedIn?
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to improvise a little bit. The first thing I want to say is that um, I I want to give Paul a lot of accolades and credit because he's been an inspiration to me too, and somebody who is working so deliberately and constantly to be the best human he can be. And while he does that, it holds space for people like me to do the same. So this is not something that we can do alone. It's not a heroic journey at all, although there is the hero's journey written somewhere. I think it's more about how do we show up for each other to find a way to navigate this world and become better humans and better professionals and better parents and better citizens. And I appreciate friendships like the one Paul offers me, and I wish that onto everybody for sure. I think that in terms of what support I need right now, the most important thing for me is to find people who are in a similar journey. It's really critical that we have, there's a lot of conversation about community. And sometimes, communities are ad hoc, and sometimes you can create your own community. And I am in a process of just finding people who are genuinely also trying to push through all these narratives, um, all of these limiting, thoughts that we're put in our heads, that are trying to build something for their own. I think there's power in sharing these experiences with each other and holding space for each other, so that we can then go out and do what we're supposed to be doing, right? And not feel isolated and awkward and weirded out about the decisions we're making. So I think that should be what I would say, Paul, right now. Continue to find each other in this platform that is LinkedIn. And if you are in a journey similar to mine and similar to Paul's, let's continue to connect and build a web that holds us together as we try to figure out our own lives and our own journeys. So that's my message for today.
Yeah,
How was
incredible.
that? How was that?
It was incredible. I I,
Okay.
I want to share. So Georgia had this thing. She said, "My best takeaway tonight: navigating this journey to be the best we can be to help others. We need each other." Yeah,
Mhm.
it. I mean, I think Lindsay said it all there, right? At the end of the day, we're all humans, and that's the one thing that we have is this human connection that whether we like it or not, like that's something that we share in common with everyone. Maybe it doesn't align, but I I really do believe that that is the huge differentiator in not just the business space, but personally as well, just connecting with people on a human level, not trying to sell them anything, not trying to do anything, make money off of them, just like connect, like with them as people. So this has been so fun for me. Thank you so much to everybody who supported. I love having these conversations, and I mean, this is really what the show was all about. Is to just create connection with people, and we all have, as I like to say, impossible moments that really are a lot of the silent catalysts that lead us to our loudest breakthroughs. So it's been so fun. Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. It's been so fun to catch up with you again and see all the incredible things that you've been up to, and yeah, just so grateful. Thank you.
Agree.